The 13th century is inseparably associated with the name of the Mongols, a force that emerged from the steppes of Mongolia under the leadership of Genghis Khan, advancing with utter brutality and a kill-and-move-on mentality, devouring, burning, destroying, and crushing everything in its path like ants. Even during Genghis Khan's lifetime, they established a vast empire, and due to the foolishness of the Khwarazm Shahs, the Mongols gained access to Iran. After Genghis's death, his sons inherited their father's legacy and continued the path of massacre, leaving a permanent mark on history. They reached from north of the Caspian Sea into Russia and from Eastern Europe to the Balkans, while on the other side, they conquered the Iranian plateau and Mesopotamia. After the fall of Baghdad, Egypt came under the rule of the Mamluks. This regime, the last stronghold of the Muslims, was about to face a battle that would change the course of history. Let us go back a little and take a look at who these Mamluks were. At the end of the 12th century, in the eastern Mediterranean, Syria, and the region of Al-Sham, along the Red Sea coastline, which has always been of great importance throughout history due to the presence of the cities of Mecca and Medina, together with Egypt and Libya, Saladin al-Ayyubi emerged. Saladin is renowned in history for his struggle against the Third Crusade and Richard the Lionheart, the second king of the Plantagenet dynasty. In these regions, he established the Ayyubid dynasty. Although the Ayyubids ruled for only a little over 80 years in total, they were generally quite influential, especially in their wars against the Christians. These Ayyubids would purchase a group of slaves, carefully select them, train them from a young age, and form a special warrior class to assist them. This group of slaves, who later seized power, came to be known as the Mamluks or Mamalik, a term derived from roots meaning property and belonging, and literally meaning slaves. By the mid-13th century, in the 1240s, during the reign of Al-Saleh Ayyub, the seventh sultan of the Ayyubid dynasty, the administration of the state was almost entirely run by the Mamluks, and the sultan had become little more than a figurehead. After Al-Saleh Ayyub's death, his son Turan Shah succeeded him, but with the help of Al-Saleh Ayyub's wife, Shajar al-Dur, and the Mamluks, a coup was carried out, and in 1250 the dynasty changed. 10 years pass. It's the year 1260. It is the reign of the third Mamluk sultan, Saif al-Din Qutuz. What are the circumstances? As Qutuz sits in his palace in Cairo, news arrives that 4 Mongol envoys have come with a message. They read it. It is filled with insults and threats from beginning to end. If you wish to survive, you must surrender, it says, hurling every kind of abuse, and adding, "We will come and destroy children, women, and every living being we encounter." Qutuz is on one side with his generals and advisors, the Mongol envoys on the other. For a while, silence prevails. The two sides lock eyes, clearly hurling harsh words at one another internally, yet maintaining diplomatic protocol. Qutuz says, "Esteemed envoys, please step outside. We wish to deliberate." Let us leave the Mamluk front and the year 1260 here. But who is this Sultan Qutuz? He's the grandson of the daughter of Sultan Muhammad Khwarazm Shah. In other words, Muhammad had a daughter, and her grandson, by a twist of fate, became the Sultan of Egypt and surrounding lands. And who was Sultan Muhammad Khwarazm Shah? He was the penultimate sultan of the Khwarazm Shahs, the man who was later praised with words like, "He was this, he was that," yet who disregarded the Otrar agreement with the Mongols, and for the sake of a trade caravan, a few goods and worldly possessions, drew Genghis Khan into Iran and West Asia. He caused the blood of millions of people to be spilled, and after realizing his mistake, he fled constantly, as if Genghis Khan was chasing him with a slipper. After the deaths of Muhammad and Genghis Khan, This tension was inherited by their successors. During the reign of Muhammad's son, Jalal ad-Din Khwarazm-Shah, the Iranian Central Plateau had not yet fallen. Jalal ad-Din repelled Mongol attacks several times and defeated them at Rai. At that time, the regions of Azerbaijan, Kurdistan, Armenia, and Georgia were all struggling with this turmoil. Eventually, with the killing of Jalal ad-Din, the heart of Iran also fell. For about a decade, the Mongols' attention shifted toward Europe as they turned from north of the Caspian Sea toward Eastern Europe. However, tensions in Iran and the Middle East flared up again, and the year reached 1255. Genghis Khan's grandson, Monke Khan, ascended the throne as the fourth great Khan, and in order to govern this vast empire, he sent his brother, Hulagu Khan, to Iran. Hulagu received direct orders to continue the conquest of Western Asia and Egypt. In his first mission, Hulagu eliminated the Batini sect known as the Hashashin, whose reputation had been magnified by enemy propaganda. Fortresses such as Alamut Castle, once the nightmare of politicians during the Seljuk era and the time of Hassan Sabah, could now be captured quite easily thanks to siege engines like catapults. As his next step, Hulagu marched on Baghdad in 1258 with 15 tumans of troops, that is, 5 units of 10,000 men each, and with his experience in siege warfare. Once the jewel of the Abbasid Caliphate, the city could not withstand the terrifying Mongol bombardment and fell rapidly. Hundreds of thousands of people were either killed or sent away as slaves. Irrigation systems that had functioned since antiquity were destroyed, and it took several centuries for agriculture in the region to recover. Baghdad's great library was lost as well. Countless volumes of books and an immeasurable amount of knowledge from our past turned to ashes. With the fall of Baghdad, the 5-century-old Abbasid Caliphate came to an end, and for the first time in history, Muslims were left without a caliph. Thus, the center of power shifted from Baghdad to Cairo. Since then, the caliphate became symbolic, since real power lay in the hands of the Sultan of Egypt, though a caliph was still appointed in Cairo for religious legitimacy. Hulagu's next move was toward Syria and the region of Al-Sham. At that time, Syria was either under Mamluk control or in the hands of the remnants of the Ayyubids. It made no difference to Hulagu. In January 1260, he reached the gates of Aleppo. Renowned for the speed of their campaigns, the Mongols were at their fastest with the backing of a vast imperial support network. They had taken Baghdad in 1258 and reached Aleppo by 1260. After the gates of Aleppo were opened to Hulagu and the news spread throughout the region, other cities such as Damascus surrendered as well, and Hulagu advanced to Damascus, only 2 steps away from Egypt. At precisely this moment, a crucial event occurred that would change the course of the coming war. Monke Khan, the great Mongol Khan who was on campaign in China, suddenly died one morning. Hulagu, likely intending to test his chances for the khanship, returned to Mongolia with the bulk of the 60,000-strong army he had brought as far as Damascus. Later, his elder brother Kublai Khan became Khan in China and founded the Yuan dynasty, while Hulagu returned to Iran and established the Ilkhanate. Hulagu had withdrawn with most of his forces, and Qutuz, who now had to decide in his palace in Cairo, was aware that the majority of Hulagu's soldiers were no longer present. Although his generals argued for surrender, the Sultan said no. This Qutuz was the nephew of Jalal ad-Din, who had managed to defeat the Mongols several times. Therefore, he knew that the Mongol invincibility was a myth. All that was spoken of was Mongol brutality and massacres, but Qutuz knew what his uncle had accomplished before. However, in the tense environment following the collapse of the Khwarazm-Shahs, resistance alone had not been possible. He believed that if a proper, disciplined, and powerful army marched against the Mongols, they could be defeated. Now, with the death of the Khan, fortune had favored them. The Mongol army had been weakened and reduced in number. Qutuz ordered that the 4 Mongol envoys be captured, cut in half, and hung at the gates. With the killing of the envoys, open war was declared against the Mongols, and a ruling of jihad was issued by this Muslim government. The Mamluk Sultan ordered cavalry and infantry from all his provinces to assemble in Cairo. Qutuz also invited his rival Baibars to take part in this critical operation. Baibars was a powerful and influential Mamluk general who had risen to command the Sultan's personal guard regiment. He had gained great fame by capturing King Louis IX of France during the Seventh Crusade. Baibars agreed to assist Qutuz in return for the governorship of Aleppo. The Cairo government made a rational decision. The Sultan's personal presence on the battlefield would be highly effective in such circumstances. Both Qutuz and Baibars were great strategists, and knowing that the Mongols' greatest strength lay in besieging cities and using catapults, they chose not to defend within the city, but to march out from Cairo and confront the Mongols in open battle. The Mamluks set out toward the eastern Mediterranean with roughly 40,000 to 50,000 troops. On the opposing side, the Mongols advanced southward with 15,000 to 20,000 Mongol soldiers under the command of Ketbuka, the trusted general of Hulagu, along with about 5,000 Armenian, Georgian, and Frankish troops. According to some sources, the numbers were around 20,000 to 25,000 on one side and 10,000 to 12,000 on the other. The Mongols planned to catch the Mamluks unprepared while they were encamped. They crossed the Jordan River and encountered them near the village of Ayn Jalut, the spring of Goliath, close to today's West Bank. According to Jewish tradition, this was the place where the prophet David shattered Goliath's head with a sling stone. Ketbuka's army crossed the Jordan in 2 columns. Christian cavalry advanced in the front ranks, while Baibars and his men lay in ambush on the heights and began raining arrows down upon them. The Mongols, who had come to launch a surprise attack, suddenly found themselves trapped. The vanguard cavalry charged the Mamluk soldiers uncontrollably, and the fighting intensified. Ketbuka could not see how many troops were hidden behind the hill, and fearing the slaughter of his cavalry, he quickly sent reinforcements and ordered the rest to form ranks behind the ridge. This created immense pressure on Baibars and the Mamluk cavalry. Here, Baibars demonstrated his military genius. He withdrew his forces with such finesse that their formations did not break. They were neither encircled nor struck from the rear. At the same time, they exhausted the enemy and inflicted losses, drawing them toward the spot where Qutuz and the main Mamluk army lay in ambush. In fact, knowing they stood no chance against catapults, the 2 commanders had chosen to fight in the open field rather than wait behind walls, and they turned the Mongols' own tactic of the feigned retreat against them. Baibars' attack and withdrawal seemed to say, "This is all we have. If you dare, come and see what lies behind the hill." When Ketbuka realized he had fallen into a trap and found himself encircled from 3 sides, he attempted a feigned retreat of his own, but the Mamluks were not deceived. The Mongol commander had sensed that the Mamluks' left wing was weaker, so he positioned most of his cavalry on his own right. In the center and on the left were the Christian contingents and other Mongol units. Ketbuka's assessment was correct. The Mamluks' left wing was taking a heavy blow. At that very moment, Qutuz rushed to the aid of the left wing with his last remaining reserve unit. In the center, meanwhile, Baibars, now reinforced, had crippled the Mongol center. When Qutuz reached his troops, he removed his helmet so they could see that the Sultan himself was on the battlefield, and he shouted a defiant challenge. The Mamluks' morale surged. With the arriving reinforcements, the situation on the left wing was stabilized, and they escaped encirclement.